Okay, 2-minute warning, folks. 2-minute warning. Good afternoon, everyone. Happy New Year. Haven't seen you all in a couple of months. Hope everybody had a good holiday. We have confirmation of quorum. We're going to call the meeting to order. We'll acknowledge that we're located on traditional territory of the Lakota people. And the agenda for the 2022, January 2022. We're a good start.
3 years, wow.
3 years. January 22nd, 2025, regular meeting of the board be adopted.
Second.
Thank you. Second was Director Mawhinney. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. No petition delegations. Adoption of minutes. The minutes of the regular board meeting held on December 2nd, I believe that is. 11th. There it is. On the 11th, 2024 be adopted.
So moved.
Thank you, Director Wally, second. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Business arising, none. Public considerations, none. Notice of motions, none. Chair's report. I called just about everybody there regarding the appointments. Everybody was happy with where they were. If not, speak out. Now's the time. Oh, first we'll do the,
Move receipt of the report from the chair.
thank you very much. Discussion? Everybody's happy? Perfect. Thank you very much. We're moving on. All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried.
And then I'll move that the appointments outlined in the January 17th report from the chair be confirmed by resolution of the board.
Thank you. Director Dahl, second. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. And that the payment,
I'll move that the payment of remuneration and travel expenses be authorized for the director appointments made at the January 22nd meeting of the board, except where provided by external organizations. Second.
perfect. Director Mawhinney. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Okay. Committee Chairs report that the minutes of the special meeting held for Electoral Area Service Committee held on December 11th, 2024 be received. Director Wally.
Second.
Director Colburn. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. And that the minutes of the special budget meeting held for Electoral Area Service Committee held on December 12th, 2024 be received.
Second.
Director Mawini, second. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. C, that the draft minutes from the inaugural meeting of the Electoral Service Committee held on January 8th, 2025 be received.
Second.
Second, Director Colburn. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Strathcona Gardens, that the draft minutes of the special meeting of the Strathcona Gardens Commission held on December 11th, 2024 be approved.
So moved.
Second.
Director Senate, Director, what's your last name again? Bonish? Yeah, Von Ash. There we go, perfect. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Staff reports. Director Rice, would you like to take this one?
Yes, I'd like to move receipt that the report from the Chief Administration Officer be received.
Second.
Second was Director Colburn. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried.
I'd like to move option B, that the development variance permit DV 3D24 Baracco as attached to the January 9th, 2025 report from the Chief Administration Officer be received, or be approved, sorry.
Second.
Director Mawini, discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Director Mawini, would you like to take this one, please?
I will move that the report on the notice of Crown land referrals be from the Chief Administrative Officer be received.
Director Wally, discussion? Director Mawini.
Thank you, Chair. I did have a question, and thank you to the staff for the report. I appreciate the opportunity to learn about the referral, so thank you. In regard to the Boralex investigative application, there is a piece of correspondence on the agenda from the Campbell River Mirror stating that there will not be an environmental assessment for this project. So I noticed in the application, the Crown referral, it refers to wildlife guidelines and talks about a critical timing window for elk, mule deer, and mountain goats as May 15th to July 15th. So pretty sure that there aren't mountain goats on Vancouver Island, and that Roosevelt elk, which is what we have here, may have different critical timing requirements. So I was just wondering if staff could weigh in on how the potential different critical timing requirements of the Roosevelt elk calving could be flagged for the company, because there is no environmental assessment being planned.
Thank you through the chair. To the director, staff's recommendation would be that in response back to the province, we indicate a concern and a requirement for the application to address the timing window for the Roosevelt elk in response back as a recommendation.
Okay,
Would that be me needing to make a motion about that? Or is that just something that staff will note and do?
We can do either, Mr. Chair. I mean, part of these, the referral showing these applications is that if the board has, resolutions that they want to include it in here, that we'll support that and respond back to the province. So if you want to make a resolution, that's good. Excuse me.
Director Mawini?
Do we need to finish receipt of this report first?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Okay, so on receipt, further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I would move that we ask staff to mention the potentially different critical timing requirements of Roosevelt elk in the area under the investigative permit referral.
Do we have a second? Director Wally, discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Okay, Director Sinnott, take the next one, please.
Yeah, make a motion with respect to the Campbell River Storm Safety Netting request that the report from the CAO be received.
Second.
Second, Director Wally, discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried.
And I'll make the subsequent that changes to the safety netting system at the Rod Brindamore Arena not be considered further at this time.
Second.
Director Chapman, discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Director Von Esch.
I'll move that the report, Cortez Solid Waste Recycle BC Incentive Reduction Report from the CAO be received.
Second.
Second was Director Colburn. Discussion? Director Sinnott.
Yes, thank you. It mentions that we're going to be in a slight deficit position, and I'm just trying to understand why we can't adjust rates now with financial planning, and which reserve are they coming out of?
Yeah, you could adjust the rate bylaw at any time, and that service does have a operating reserve that we're currently pulling money from, and then usually the operating reserves reserved for any sudden spikes of increase or any type of change of service levels, so that can be done at any time.
Yeah, thank you. Is there a policy on having a certain level of operating reserve? Is this something that's just going to cause a bigger increase later on down the road? Is there a smoothing effect we can, for the taxpayers now?
No, the reserves there are quite healthy. We don't have a policy, but they've just kind of accumulated over time. It won't cause any immediate impact, but yeah, I think over time they have to go to about $150. So how they get there, that's up for the director to decide.
Okay, so, I know we have a contract in front of us, and I just wanted to hear from Director Von Esch whether he has any concerns about smoothing the increases for his constituents.
Yeah, thank you, Director Sinnott. I think that's what our intention here is, that we're using some of the operating reserves to smooth, and rather having it jump to that big number right away, that we do it over a few years and make the adjustment a bit more easy for taxpayers.
So I think just for clarity, I don't know if Mike was just going to say this, but the report is we have a capital reserve that identifies capital works, and I think the intention here is to, because it's not a service that requires like tangible capital assets, and that those be transferred into an operations reserve where we can use them for rate smoothing such as this.
Director Chapman.
Thank you, Chair. The capital reserve, is that a statutory reserve or just another form of operating reserve?
Well, go ahead.
It's statutory. We have a report coming on that, I believe, at the number 12.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. B.
I'll move that the chair and corporate officer be authorized to execute an agreement with Recycle BC to provide multi-stream curbside recycling on Cortez Island in accordance with the December 18th, 2024 report from the CAO.
Second.
Director Colburn was second. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Number 5, draft 2025-2029 financial plan, that the report from the CAO be received.
So moved.
Second.
Director Von Esch, discussion?
Well, I think Mike has a presentation here, Mr. Chair. And just while he pulls that up, I'll just give the board a refresher on the financial planning process, whereas we brought estimates to year end in the October-November meetings. We had one-on-one meetings with the electoral areas. We did business cases with appropriate committees, incorporate those into the financial plan projections that we had, consolidated the year-end financials, the new assessments, and put all those into what you've been presented today, and represented them as on a municipal and electoral area impact financially to the 2020-25 financial plan. So what you see in here is going to incorporate all the input that you provided to us, a basis-based budget, which has, contractual agreements, obligations built into it. And this is, for regional districts, what we try and represent here as, because not everybody, receives the same services. We take, if you received all the services and you were the average home price value, that this is what the impact would be. It's as close as we can really come, and it's pretty darn close for most folks. Obviously, if you have a house that's a little bit higher, a little bit lower, you'll be adjusted accordingly. But what you'll see here, based on the board's further input that they'll have today, is what we're looking at, the current impact on the individual budgets. So I'll pass it to Mike.
Thanks. And the one thing I would add to that, going forward, the one thing we tend to adjust is just the spending estimates for the capital projects, just to make sure once we get all the year-end spending and everything else in. So for today's presentation, I thought we'd run through the slides, and staff can interrupt me where appropriate, and then we do questions at the end, just to make it hopefully a bit more efficient. So the goals for this meeting are pretty simple. I just want to spend some time looking at assessments and the assessment shift. Want to review the draft requisition estimates, and then seek your direction on the next steps to produce a financial plan bylaw. Those are due March 31st from the province. So overall, I think everybody here knows, but just for the folks watching, that assessments are the tax base that all local governments use to assess for property taxes. It's the total of all the real value property in the region. This year, we're at 15.7 billion for our group. Everything here is, all these numbers come from BC assessment. They're not established by any of the local governments. In BC, all properties divided up into 9 separate classes, which we'll have a look at, and each gets its own weighting for the property tax purposes. During the surplus report presentation a couple months ago, we talked about the biggest misconceptions in finance, and this one is probably the biggest in that there's a lot of people, a big misunderstanding of how the assessment values don't increase or decrease the amount of taxes we collect overall. So really assessments don't drive the amount of tax, they just distribute it amongst the people, and we'll look at that through the next several slides. Lost power. Thank you. So these are the 9 classes in BC, and they all get a different conversion factor. So any of the utilities or industry have a higher taxation impact for, or when it comes to the property tax calculations. Municipalities can control the individual weighting of these classes, whereas regional districts can't. We just use the provincial standards, and those standards haven't fluctuated very often. They've been the same for a number of years now. We express most of our costs in the budget as cost per household or a residential mill rate, but each of the services have a table showing all the applicable rates for any of the classes. We also focus on the residential mill rates, so it's hard to analyze that without looking at all the changes from the other classes, so we'll spend a bit of time on that today. Given the dollar amounts and these weightings, any change in the assessment values can actually have a pretty big impact on your taxes. In recent years, we began to quantify this impact, and we call it the assessment shift. So you'll see that on a lot of the charts today. Really, that kicked off in 2020 when they changed how managed forests were operated, and they changed the assessment. And that actually had a big increase to all of our taxes, when a lot of times the requisition didn't change. Next slide. So assessment shift is essentially divvied up into, or caused by 2 factors. The first is for any of the shared regions. It's when the relative value of one region changes compared to the other ones, and you'll have taxes shifting in and out of that region. So if area B, for example, increased at a faster rate than area C, you would see a change of taxes to each of the areas. The other big impact is when assessment value is shifting in between classes. So it could shift to and from households. So again, if you have your business assessments or managed forest lands assessments changing, often that could have a 3-to-1 impact, and it'll really impact your houses. Overall, the assessments are a zero-sum game. Whenever taxes flow from one area, they'll flow from another, and it always nets out at zero. So this is the assessment, the regional assessment shift for our area. all the applicable taxes. So being Campbell River is a big size of our requisition, wherever they go, it tends to impact everything. But so it's 2.2 is the average. If the blue bar is above the dotted line, essentially taxes flow from other regions into that region. And if it's below the dotted line, they'll flow from that region. Again, 2.2% is the average for all 10 of our members. If you're dealing with a service like municipal or EA administration, you'd have to take that subgrouping and calculate a new average. So if you're dealing for EA administration, for example, you just look at the 4 electoral areas, that average is 0.7. So there you'd have taxes shifting from B and C into A and D. And then each service you have to look at individually. Next slide. So this slide quantifies that assessment. So if you take $100,000 of assessment this year versus last year, Campbell River would end up paying $327 more. So this year, like I say, it's quite subdued. In the last couple of years, we've had some pretty big jumps in the residential assessments, as everybody knows. But now it's normalized quite a bit. And again, yeah, so the electoral area average was 0.7. So again, you're going to have a bit more of a drastic move there. But again, last year's spread was actually about 12.6%, whereas this year it's only about 3.9. So the regional shift is down quite a bit. Perhaps most important line, again, Trudeau, is the net change. Everything kind of nets out at zero. So again, the big misconception is that assessments will drive the amount of tax we collect, where it doesn't. Again, it just distributes it. Next slide. So that was the regional shift. This slide focuses on the shift between classes. So what you have there is the big blue bars are your total tax base, and then the green line is just the residential portion. So if you take TASIS, for example, the last slide showed that their entire tax base increased 11.4%, but just the residential portion increased 13.5%. So that's one of the bigger variances. So you can have taxes eventually, essentially flowing out of their other classes into the residential classes, and it's going to show up as a tax increase once we see our charts. And again, we're 15.7 billion assessments. So when that starts shifting around and we start measuring stuff in taxes per 100,000, you can actually see some pretty big jumps, but it's not near as bad as last year. So Sayward, TASIS, Sabalis, and KCFN, they're going to have the biggest assessment shift impacts on this slide, just because they're residential so far removed from their other classes. Next slide. So I just wanted to highlight this. This is a chart or set of charts we've always included in the budget, but we don't pay them much attention. So I thought we'd have a look at them this year. But you'll see the full 5-year chart in your applicable budgets. But this is just a zoom up of Campbell River, just so we don't have to squint at it. But this shows the change of tax base over multiple years. So the big green bar is the residential portion at the top, and last year Campbell River residences absorbed 78.8% of all the taxes. So although the residential classes increased for Campbell River this year, they're only absorbing 78.1%. So you'll actually see the taxes shift out of the residential side, despite the fact that the overall assessment had increased. So Campbell River just went over. So last year they were at $985 million, and so this year the residential class has gone over $1 billion. So that's a 2% increase, but again, the proportion's actually gone down. So you have it's kind of complicates the assessment shift calculation. Go to the next slide. This one is Gold River. Again, this is actually very stable for this year. Oh, I forgot to mention in the chart below is actually the change of the number of folios. So that's essentially a measurement of your non-market change. So again, Gold River was quite stable. So that green bar actually grew 3% this year, but the other bars all grew a combination of 2%. So again, you're going to have taxes flowing out of out of the household side, but it's quite subdued. Go to the next slide. So Sayward was actually a pretty big jump this year. So they have their residential classes are going to have 1.5% more taxes, which is the biggest for the village. And again, that green bar is actually going up about 8.6. They have quite a significant jump in the property values this year. So they're going to see a tax shift into their area. Next slide. So for Tassus, again, that was another big jump in the residential. So the here is actually in the other categories. They're managed forest lands, which doesn't show up here. It's just grouped in with the other, but that got cut almost in half, and the number of folios didn't change. So looked like it was a provincial reclassification or something in there. But that residential increase was about 13.5%. So Tassus will have the biggest dollar impact as far as or relative increase as far as the assessment goes. Next slide. And again, this is Zabalis was quite muted this year, but again, they just had a big increase in the on the residential side. Let's see, go to the next slide. And KCFN, so this slide kind of highlights the data that we get from the province. Again, it's BC Assessment that assesses all this. So for KCFN, we only ever see one residential folio, which includes all their houses up there, and it has quite a low assessment value relative to the others. So originally when the data came in, there was 2 residential folios, but there's only been 1 ever since, and the valuation kind of jumps around this year. So overall, they attract a smaller requisition, but the actual assessment shift normalized for everything else is probably about 50% this year. We go to the next slide. So this is electoral area A, which is always interesting. So they have the smallest portion of residential assessments of all our areas. So they have a really high impact or a really high component of utilities and light industry. So any of their changes when we're just looking at the per household changes are actually quite muted compared to some of the other areas. So this year, again, we'll have taxes flowing out of residential over the light industry and whatnot, which is going to lower some of the per household costs. And this is another area too where their managed forest assessments were dropping for some reason. So again, that's flowing out over into the other classes. Next slide. So this is area B, and opposite of area A, they actually have the highest amount of residential assessment. So any changes that are made to their underlying finances really show up on their chart. Just for trivia, for any $1 household increase, it equals about $948 of taxation, just because they only have 887 folios in that area. And then again, any other changes can really affect them on the side. Next slide. So this is electoral area C. Again, we have another shift out of residential. This year, the folio changes are quite peculiar, but that's always been the case for area A. As you can see, the chart on the below, they've last year they're up 5 residential folios. This year they're down 5. And again, the managed forest lands, that must have got reclassed or something along those lines. But area C has always had quite unique properties. So any docks, for example, they get a residential folio number, and they'll give quite a small valuation as well. So it could really fluctuate. But that's one thing I noticed was all the properties are going somewhere. So I think some of them were actually amalgamated. So you have 2 or 3 folios amalgamated into one. So I think that's likely the case of what's happening. Next slide, and then area D, again, this was pretty stable this year with a slight shift out from the residential class. So next slide. So this is the 2025 change in home values that we use. So a quick word on this is for our budget, we use the mathematical average, which is just the total assessment value divided by the total number of occurrences. If you're looking at these numbers compared to any real estate agency or anything else, they'll probably have different numbers. Most real estate agencies, for example, ignore any trailer parks, apartments, vacant land, or anything to come up with their numbers. And in our budget, we just, like I say, take the total amount and divide it by the total occurrences to come up with the average. In our budget on page 51 and 110, we also do a stratification chart to show you how many properties fall into the different value categories, so you can have a look at. Again, that's based on a different data set as well, so I exclude a bunch of the smaller properties and anything multi-class just to get at a normal residential. So you see slightly different amounts, but all the tax rates and everything are calculated on these numbers. And as we saw from the past slides, TASIS would be in the number one spot, so they'll have a bigger impact on the charts going forward. And then B and C get a break this year. Next slide. So before we get into the actual tax numbers, I thought we'd just highlight some changes to the budget document. The first thing we added in was some fund summaries and some KPIs. I think as people know, we send our budget every year for review, and they have certain categories or certain items that they want to see in the budget to just ensure everything's transparent. So we've added those in. We've also added in some commentary on the capital projects and how they affect the operating budget. It was another requirement. At the last meetings, we had discussed getting in the requisition amounts per region. So for any shared services, I've added that table in so everyone can see how much each area pays into any service. And there's also another request to add in the grant and aid budget line for the general admin. So we've done that. The other quick note is we're kind of for trivia, but we're now at 242 pages. The biggest complaint I get every year about our budget document is just the number of pages. People want it skinnier, but we actually hit a high a couple years ago, 300 pages. So we're down 18%. We have a lot more content in there, but that's one reason we do try and keep it as concise as possible, just because people don't like a big document. See the next slide. So we'll just have a quick run through here of all the applicable tax changes. So for Campbell River, this is $186 per home increase. Again, this is just based on the draft info we have so far. Most of this increase comes from the business cases. If you normalize that if everyone recalls, the regional housing business case. We had a general government business case for the First Nations reconciliation framework, and we have the Strathcona Gardens, which just affects Campbell River and Area D. But that's the primary reason for the increase there. Next slide. For Gold River, and this is going to be ring true for most of the other villages as well. The bigger increases you're going to see are regional housing, 911, and then just general admin. And there's we actually brought the impact was bigger when we looked at it in December, but we have some extra investment income this year, so we smoothed the requisition a bit. So you're only seeing impact for the general administration, about half of the business case amount. But again, 911 was another sizable increase. So yeah, total change $824 per home. And when you get to Sayward, this is going to be the big impact, but it's all with the fire, and it's pretty much a presentation issue. So last year, of course, the Sayward Village itself collected for their fire. So this is the first year we happen to be showing for it. So it's not really a $261 tax increase to the residents. Most of that money has already been collected by the Village of Sayward. It's just showing up on our reports for the first year. So if you normalize for that, it's a $13 increase. And without the tax shift, it would be down to about a $10 increase. And most of that stems from the regional housing business case and the other one in general administration. When you're looking at TASIS, again, this is $833 per home. And again, this is really impacted by the assessment shift here. So that's almost 40% of that increase, or $3.13 is the assessment shift, and we show that on the grayed out chart to the side. Next slide. And for Zabalis, much the same story, but the shift is a little bit smaller here, or less impactful here, 23%. And then one note that you're not seeing any shift for the function 272 Strathcona Emergency Program. So that's the one function we have with a minimum requisition of $1,000 per area. So because Zabalis is, if you do the math on that, they're slightly under, so they get bumped up to $1,000 every year. So you don't see a shift there. And when you're actually looking at the tax rates, they're going to have a higher tax rate than they're going to have a higher mill rate than anybody else because of that minimum. And again, overall, that's a $5 increase for Zabalis based on the data we have so far. And this is for KCFN. Again, here it's with the, you're seeing a big impact for the residential shift and then the fact that they share in the regional housing. So if you normalize for that, the shift is actually half of the reason for the increase. So despite their percentage change, it's about a $99 requisition overall. So their percentages just look big when you're doing the math on that. So this is for Area A. I took a bit of artistic liberty this year and have cropped out the middle chunk of services that don't really move much. We could always pull up the full chart if people prefer, but I always just found them a little hard to read when they're on the projector. So unless anyone objects, I just kind of, like I say, cropped out the stuff that doesn't move around a bit. So for Area A, I just want to point out too that the Duncan Bay Fire Protection, the big drop for 157, that's not included in any of the totals. That only affects a very small number of homes. So we show it here, but we don't add it in. We don't include it in any of the totals. So again, with Area A, if you remember, 46% of their tax base is residential, so you don't see the effects of a lot of the shift here. And then I'll just point out, this is a 1 year too, where we've had a couple decreases. If you look at the 120 grant aid and the 151 feasibility study, so that's actually, and in combination with the fire, it's resulting in a decline in Sayward and an increase for the Cayucet side. For Area A, we always try and present the two different areas, which were the old electoral area boundaries. And again, here fire is the big impact. So go to the next slide. And again, with Area B, I cropped out some of the other services, but you can go to page 149 in your budget document if you want to see the complete chart. So the big story with Area B this year, I guess, would be the tax shift. It's shifting out, but if anyone recalls last year, they had the #1 residential increase. So they actually saw a really big tax shift last year, and it's kind of reversed a bit this year. Again, their top three changes so far be Cortez Fire, the business case for the regional housing, and VRL is also showing up. So they had quite a significant increase this year as well. So that's I think in the third place at a $10 increase for them. The one thing I'll point out too is the one decrease you say is $374 for their refuse disposal. So we also had a bit of a requisition smoothing in that, and we came under with the tipping fees. So last year there was a business case to add in the glass recycling, so we came in a bit under budget for that. So you see a bit of normalizing there, but I always try and pay attention to the tax decreases because they stick out. So go to the next slide. Area C is pretty much the same as B, but instead with the fire, they have the community hall this year, which is the larger increase. And again, I'll just point out that the economic development is more of a normalization, so they've achieved their budget goal of having so much available to spend. So now they're just returned to maintenance. The other one that sticks out is the 158 feasibility studies, which they always act different than the rest of the services. For feasibility studies, they tend to have no annual recurring spending, so they're pretty much project-based, so you're always going to see those amounts bounce around in our budgets when we're just looking at one particular year. And the other strange thing about feasibility study is if a service actually goes ahead, it can get paid back a couple years later from the new service. So anyway, when you're looking at these charts, it's hard to draw much of any conclusions for anything feasibility studies. And so get Area D. Again, I've had to crop a lot out here, so Area D has the most services of any areas, but more than happy to pull up the full chart if people want. So I'll just point out, area function 790 Oyster River Bank is only 20 homes or so we don't include that total in any of the chart, and it's just increased because we're doing a bit of more of the on the maintenance side, and we had a low requisition last year. Again, the regional housing was a sizable one for the business case, and the other big change since December is we received all the shared service budgets from the city of Campbell River, so we imputed those amounts. And then in the one-on-ones, we had the big drop in Area D is pretty much just the reserve transfer. So Area D Parks has quite healthy reserves, so they were just normalized with the thought that because the Strathcona Gardens business case was being contemplated, and then the other big drop was for the Campbell River fire protection. So in the past, the Campbell River's budget's always included a large amount of capital for an upcoming build of a new fire hall. So that was never funded in theirs. So this year, they've removed that anyway from their 5-year plan. And then, so we've, the capital transfer was lowered during the one-on-ones. So anyway, there's a bit of an actual increase of cost of the underlying service costs, but the big deduction you see there is just from the capital reserve transfer, just like parks. And then the other big change, of course, was the Strathcona Gardens business case. So that is the overall look at the taxes per region. This slide is included in the budget, and it's just a quick focus on the expense side of things. This chart actually looks at the changes of our expenses that we list in our budget, our financial plan bylaw every year, and that they get reported to the ministry. So if people look up, they can see our total spend increasing or decreasing by so far about 9.2%. But it's kind of a misnomer because a lot of the expenses, should almost not be considered expenses. So I'll give you an example for the general government service. There we actually held the overall requisition flat this year. It's just, there was a slight increase for the half of the business case, but that large increase you see there is just because TASIS is looking to take on debt, and then anytime we have a debt flow through from a member municipality, it'll actually show up as an expense side, but there would be an offsetting amount in the revenue line. In the next bar over for protective services, we have a big drop there, and that's just stemming from all the grants we've been getting historically. So if everyone recalls, back in 2023, we got a number of very, very large grants that we've been working on, and those are all lasting for multiple years. So we've done a bunch of spending in 2023 and 2024, so the amount of budget we've been carrying forward is slowly shrinking as we spend those. So again, that big drop there has, just like the general government, that change has very little impact on the overall taxation. But if you were to look at the provincial reports, it shows up as a it still is a change of expense. And then other than that, and then the blue bar, of course, that's the Strathcona Gardens debt is the primary change there. And again, that would just be 30-year debt on a 60-year, 70, 80-year facility. So that's a big impact there. So our budget, again, it tends to focuses on the tax rates, taxes per home or taxes per 100,000, and it kind of shies away from on the expense side, just because it doesn't really have much meaning or focus. But if you look at any of the function pages within that, we have 5-year charts showing both the 5-year history of the tax requisition and 5-year history of the expense budget, so people can put that together and analyze it. So the next chart we look at is I download from the ministry the total taxes and fees for all the municipal members. They don't publish any of this data for the electoral areas, unfortunately. So this is the amount we get from the government for the 2024 total residential fees and charges. And what I did is I just added the budget you just looked at, the 2025 increase, just to provide some extra content. Sayward is missing just because they didn't submit any data to the ministry, so I don't know their fees and charges for 2024, but it would act quite similar to Gold River. Go to the next slide. Again, the other comparison I try and do, just because it's quite hard to compare regional districts, is I get data from the ministry. And again, this is 2 years removed, so we're looking at the 2023 data, but it's something I always put the charts in the budget if anyone wants to have a look. So this chart just takes every regional district in British Columbia and it lines it up by population size. And then you can see the relative size of our requisition. So we're highlighted in red, and just for convenience, I highlighted the Comox Valley because they're perhaps our most closer comparison, but kind of as you would imagine, as your population increase, so does the requisition. Yeah, we're mostly in line. Let's see, go to the next slide. And so this is similar data, but what I did is instead of lining everything up by population, I lined it up by the total assessment base or the tax base. And then I took total requisition divided by total assessments, and I came up with a number. Again, it doesn't mean too much in and of itself, but you can kind of see where the regional district lie if we just, again, take the total amount we requisition divided by the total tax base. This is not the converted assessment. It's actually the total amount of assessments. And the dashed line is just a linear trend line, but it's kind of as you would expect. The economies of scale start kicking in as you add in more, business and commercial and everything else. Your taxes can actually go down per assessed value. So you click next slide. Okay, so that's most of my presentations in a nutshell. We can move on to questions now. I'd just like to say that our first slide said we're looking for, or the stated goal number 3 was to seek direction from the board on what you want to produce or what you wanted to see in a bylaw. So we'll answer any questions and then get your direction for how to move forward.
Okay, first question's coming from Director Wally.
Just 2 things, Mr. Chair. One on page 37, consolidated reserve schedule for Area A, parks, recreation, and cultural services. Just curious, what is that? Because I haven't got any parks, recreation, cultural services.
Parks.
150,000.
One sec here. But I know the Cayucit Hall, but it doesn't have any reserves. Let me show, that shows up.
You can let me know later if it's not evident right away.
I'll look it up here, but.
All right, and one more thing, page 24, this is our performance indicators. Strategic priority, public engagement, we had 14 surveys, that's nice. But what I wanted to say about that is, I think most of these surveys were probably through our consultants that we hired. They ask questions of the public, like, do you think recreation is important? Oh yeah, really important. Do you think it'd be nice if you had a pool in your backyard? Oh yeah, that'd be great. But I think what's lacking is questions revolving around cost. Would you be willing to pay, I don't know, $500 a year addition on your taxes for this service? So to me, a survey without questions including cost are somewhere between of little value and useless. So I would like to recommend that we instruct our consultants to ask questions that pertain to cost. Get a real reflect to what the public wants. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll just point out, some of our surveys actually go through Facebook and everything else, and that's quite cheap to do. And your recreation is you have a Heritage Hall in Sayward, and then you have the Cayucit Hall, and most of those reserves are in Heritage Hall.
Right, yeah.
Okay, additional questions? Director Chapman.
Thank you, Chair. One quick question I have is, you have, general government that serves all sorts of functions or services. What is our methodology of internal recoveries to general government from the different services that receive services from general admin and so forth?
Yeah, long story short, so our general government is divided into 7 different categories. One with general admin, we have finance is in one grouping, IT is in another grouping. We have our fleet. Fleet is done by actual usage. Finance and IT are divvied up by transactions, which is not a very great system, but it's divvied up. And then the function 114 is the corporate office space. That was divvied up. It's pretty much 2/3 one. So the EAs pay a big chunk of it because that was the thought back in the day is they use more of the facilities, whereas there's 28% essentially goes to the EA admin, and the rest goes into general because the EAs were pay a higher part for using the facilities more. And then the function 111 is our general administration. So that would be like reception time and everything. That doesn't get divvied up. And function 110 is all the revenue that came in, which you're pretty much there is looking at the 170,000 in grants and grants in lieu, and about another 170,000 in the rural grant we get. That doesn't get divvied up, but it kind of nets out, and all that would get just split by assessment.
So maybe if I can to simplify it, so this regional district inherited when we split an allocation formula from the Comox Strathcona Regional District. And what I've done every year when we've had a new group of elected officials is present what that, and I title it by transactions, like Mike said. It's a little more complicated than that, and offer the board the opportunity to look at that and options. So the board has directed us to come back with a report on allocation options, which I'll have at the February meeting. So it'll give you a detail of how those are split, how we do it, how other regional districts do it. Do you want to keep the same? Do you want to change that formula?
Thank you.
Director Sinnott.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And thank you for the presentation. And I think the question is going to be answered in terms of how the property assessments work and then the different classes of property that's being taxed. But when I looked at page 49 of the document, which is page 51 online, on the summary for Campbell River, it looks like we have a $187 increase on a 551/2024 base, it's rounded around, which is 34%, of which the majority is the gardens. And if I back out about $160 for garden, maybe it's a bit more, we're down to just under 5% increase on an average home. But then I look at the numbers that are presented at page 54 of the document, which are the gross numbers with respect to Campbell River. Do the same calculation. It's a 35.8% increase in general requisition, but when you back out the gardens again, because that's a big number of over $3 million, it's 2.8. So now I'm sitting there going, okay, that must be within the different classes of properties? Yeah. Okay. So why is the increase seeming a little bit harder on the average homeowner than the general 2.8, which is an excellent result, by the way, if you're backing out the gardens, it's a good result. So trying to explain that to different people. And so my follow-up question was, the city acts as the collector of the $13.3 million. Does the city control the allocations out to the different classes of property, or is that something the SRD controls?
Yeah, so we'll send you a bill for 13 million.
Right.
And then how you collect that is up to you. But yes, Campbell River has always adjusted
Okay.
the base.
So it's under our control, and the impacts right now are falling more heavily, I guess, on the quote average home than the general requisition total. Okay, well, that answers my question. Thank you.
Yeah, so just to highlight, is that the second table you're looking at with the 35.8, that's the total requisition, again, for all your classes.
Right.
The other thing that makes it hard to do is when you're looking at your total assessment increase, there's also non-market change. So, and then when you're looking at the average home, so it can get kind of confusing. Like if you take your rate per 100,000, and your non-market, like if your assessments go up 2% and your non-market change goes up 2%, all the numbers work great. But
Right.
if your non-market change this year went up 0.5% and your assessments went up 2%. So essentially your home values increase, and when you're looking at the average per home, it gets a little bit confusing. Most of the numbers work the same, but it's not quite exact.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Director Von Esch.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Mike, for the presentation. I, for one, really appreciate a thick budget document with all the details, and I think it's kind of rare to have a finance person say, I'm taking some artistic liberties. So I appreciate the way you present and the information. I think it's really clear. So just wanted to thank you for that, and I do have a motion, Chair, for just a slight change on one of my functions.
Okay, we're still on receipt, so we'll go after. Director Mawhinney.
Thank you, Chair. And again, I echo what Director Van Esch just said about thank you for the presentation. I was curious if the slides that you presented will be attached to the minutes, because that would be really helpful, I think, for reference.
Yeah, they will be.
Oh, okay, great. And then I did have one other quick question. I know when we were looking at the business cases, and we were looking at the Indigenous engagement business case, that is $92,000, which is included in the operating budget for strategic initiatives. And I think there had been maybe talk after, or, about the possibility of using the operating reserve, because there's a fairly healthy operating reserve in that function. Has that been considered by the CAO? Does that seem like it would be sensible, or is it better to take it out, to do requisition for it?
Yeah, I could clarify a bit on that. Yeah, again, this is draft budget, so everything's function to change. But if you look at the total requisition for our general admin, it's going up $46,000 year over year, and that's exactly 50% of the business case. So the reason by that is we did have some extra income, and we have a growing surplus because of the regional fire. But if you look on the one page of our 5-year history of our general admin, it hasn't been increasing for the past couple of years. Just with surpluses and staff vacancy and everything else. So it's like winding a spring is building pressure. So eventually it's got to increase. So, but because this year is, especially with the interest rates and everything else, we minimize that increase from what you saw. So yeah, instead of being flat plus 96, it's only a 46,000. And again, that's just function in the reserves, because eventually those increases will be coming. So, I always try and get it up incrementally every year to try and smooth the requisition. But like I say, if the board wants to use more or less requisition to smooth it down or lose ground, I'll say, they're happy to do so.
I think in essence, though, we've done what you've suggested, though.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that has already happened. Appreciate that.
Okay, so on receipt, all in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Thank you very much for the presentation.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may, before Director Von Esch, I think and appreciate it that there was only 2 changes that we had from input, and I think we have resolutions from them. So I think it's Director Von Esch, and I think Director Rice will speak to it. So if those resolutions pass, we'll incorporate that and bring it, the plan to the next meeting. So if I can hijack being the chair, I think Director Von Esch has one under.
Thank you, Chair and CAO. Yeah, just a slight change here. Looking to use $54,000 worth of gas tax money to cover some of the firefighting capital costs that are right now being tax requisitioned into reserves. And I spoke with Mike about this yesterday, and he seemed clear on it, and this is something we can definitely do. So my motion is that I move that $54,000 be allocated from gas tax to fund Cortez fire capital fleet replacement and reduce the annual capital reserve transfer by the same amount.
Do I have a second? Second. Director Wally, discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Thank you. Director Rice?
Thank you, Chair. I have a motion that the Strathcona Gardens requisition for Phase 2 of the Recreate project be reduced to $80 per home year for Area D and the City of Campbell River in the 2025 financial plan.
Second.
Director Sinnott, discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Thank you. And B, that the 2025-2029 financial plan be prepared for consideration at the February 19th, 2025 meeting of the board.
So moved.
Director Colburn, Director Wally.
And we'll see those changes then.
Further discussion? All in favor? Further discussion?
I have
Director
one more
Colburn?
question. And then in the chart of our financial plan, is there still time to, if the changes are significant and not what the board chooses by either one of those resolutions, then we can still make changes at that meeting before
Yeah.
final adoption in May?
Yes.
Or March, I mean. Thanks.
Yeah.
All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Director Wally, you're up.
Kelsey Center Committee Terms of Reference, move that the report of the Chief Administrative Officer be received.
Second.
Director Colburn, discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried.
I'd further move, Mr. Chair, the terms of reference for the Kelsey Center Review Committee attached to December 2024 report for the Chief Administrative Officer be approved.
Second.
Director Mawhinney, discussion? Director Colburn.
I have a question. It's not very often that I see a committee of 4.
Yeah,
What's the?
I don't know if there was a whole lot of science behind that or math. Yeah, unless anybody else has anything. There was 2 EAs and, oh no, maybe there's 3 EAs. Sorry, my bad. I don't
No,
know.
2,
Oh, is there? Yeah.
please. Director Wally?
When the Village of Sayward had a delegation, I had 25 questions, I think it was at the time, weren't fully answered. They're critical questions for my constituents, so this committee needs to investigate those, get the answers to those, and by that time, I'll probably have 25 more. That's the intent.
It's just the makeup of the committee seems strange to me. I've always seen a 5 or a 7 or an uneven number, and I was just curious. Thanks.
Okay, further discussion? Director Sinnott?
Yes, just a clarification from staff. If the chair of the committee or any of the members of the committee so want to invite assistance from other staff members in terms of assessing the mandate of the committee, is that permitted so long as our CAO is in agreement?
Yes.
Okay.
Further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Director Mawhinney.
Thank you, Chair. I will move that the Surge Narrows Post Office License Renewal Report from the Chief Administrative Officer be received.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried.
And I will further move that the Chair and Corporate Officer be authorized to execute the modification agreement to extend the Canada Post license for part of the Surge Narrows Wharf for an additional year.
Director Wally, discussion? Director Von Asch?
Just a quick comment. This might be the cutest post office in BC. It's on a wharf, and it's just like the sweetest little thing, if anybody ever has a chance to see it.
Mr. Yates?
Just to advise the board, pardon me, that we have received quite a number of comments from local residents, all of which are in favor of the regional district proceeding with this initiative, so.
Further discussion? Director Mawhinney?
Well, I did notice that that was mentioned in the report. I was curious that the particular comments aren't in, like, we did advertise for public comment, and then those comments are not included in the report. Is that a general process that we follow?
Mr. Chairman, we typically don't include those comments. There are issues of privacy, et cetera, but I can summarize them by saying all of them were in favor. Some might be interpreted as we should make it a longer extension, but that's not really before the board, so.
Okay, further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Number 8, Director Chapman. No, Martin Davis, sorry. Martin, are you there? There we go.
Yes, I am. This report for Chief Administrative Officer.
I'm sorry, your audio is gone. He's underwater.
I'm sorry.
There you go.
Yours is a little rough too. Just moving that the report from the Chief Administrative Officer be received.
Second.
Thank you. Director Wally, second. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Thank you. Director Davis?
That the report from the Chief Administrative Officer be received for long-term borrowing requests, Tassus wastewater treatment project.
Option A on number 8.
I think you're a report ahead, Director Davis, there. I think we're looking at options for the municipal services agreement for TASIS. There's a couple options available for you.
I'm sorry. Option A, move option A.
Second.
Director Colburn, discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Okay, number 9, Director Davis.
Okay. This would be the long-term borrowing request, Tassus wastewater treatment project. A, that the report from the Chief Administrative Officer be received.
Second.
Director Colburn, discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. B,
Move B, that a security issuing bylaw be prepared for consideration in the next board meeting to accommodate the request for long-term capital financing by the Village of Tassus.
Second.
Director Mawhinney? I'll take a guess at that. Discussion? Director Von Esch.
Yeah, I just have a question, just in plain language for folks listening online or looking at this on the agenda. Some people might interpret that this is debt that we're taking on. Could you just explain it for
Sure,
folks?
yeah.
Thanks.
The province only allows regional districts to take on borrowing authority. I think the theory behind that is the regional district is bigger should there be a default in the municipality. So all municipalities must borrow through the regional district, so it's just a flow through. So we'll borrow, then we'll get the invoices, we'll send it to them, and they'll pay us.
It's our debt.
Thank you, I appreciate it. So technically, we're on the hook, but
Yeah.
TASIS pays for it. And we're
Yeah,
confident
like
they'll
if
pay for it.
TASIS goes bankrupt, we're on the hook for it.
You hear that, Director Davis?
I think we're good there.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Director Colburn. Ooh,
Regional Emergency Support Services Grant. I would move that the report from the CAO be received.
Second.
Mr. Chair, I believe our emergency management coordinator is away, but I think he's online. He was at an emergency.
there
Thank you,
you go.
Mr. CAO. Through the board, or through the chair to the board, the proposal in front of you is to go over just slightly $500,000 to support the Regional Emergency Support Services Program with training, supplies, and mass care provisions. There are 13 this is a partnership between 13 communities, and since the board publication deadline on Friday, I can confirm that Sayward, Tassis, and Gold River have all also passed their resolutions of support. And I'm available if there's any questions. We just had a large order of tables for our ESS facilities arrive at the search and rescue hall, so I'm down here coordinating. Apologies for not being there in person.
No, not a problem. Thank you. Director Mawhinney.
Thank you, Chair. And I do have a couple of questions to staff, but I want to begin by saying how grateful I am that the SRD Emergency Preparedness Team is thinking big and regionally and holistically about the whole North Vancouver Island area. And my questions are around capacity. There's a lot of items that are listed there. And so I'm curious if there is capacity spread out amongst the participating areas for safe storage of these supplies. Like there's 600 blankets and 43,000 servings of freeze-dried food and 750 cases of canned emergency water. So I was just curious if that was the plan for the supplies to be distributed throughout the participating areas. And my second capacity question is that I see that there's an administration assistant in the budget, and will that adequately cover the time and energy required to manage this project? Is there capacity within our department for adequate management?
Yeah, thanks for the questions there. So through the chair to Director Malwini, thank goodness for CCAN's shipping containers. They serve as our primary mechanism of storing these supplies throughout the SRD, and the Mount Waddington Regional District follows this lead. So yes, we wouldn't be going after such a bulk amount of mass care provisions if there wasn't a place to adequately, safely, and securely protect it and store it. The Emergency Support Services Assistant is what gives us the capacity to undertake this grant, this project. It's very similar to the proposal we applied for last year, and it's working out very well here.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Director Chapman.
I want to echo comments made that we're taking a broad approach to this. It was, I think, in 2013 or 14, there was a big conference down in that the CVRD hosted, and it was with emergency planning. And the general thought of the room was that if we have a big shake, a very big shake, we will not see, up here in the north end of Vancouver Island and the west coast of Vancouver Island, we will not see any assistance coming here from any federal or provincial agencies for a long time. So with that said, we need to make plans to keep our people alive for at least 40, 50 days before we get any assistance. So we have to make sure we have plans in place for that. So with most telecommunications are going to be down, unless those who have satellite service, contact is going to be limited, and we'll need to fend for ourselves. So I think this is a good start. I don't think we are seeing the end of this. I would expect this is only one of 4 or 5 stages that we need to do in order to get ourselves to be self-sufficient in the event of a large major event. Thank you.
Thank you. Still on receipt. Director Sinnott.
Yeah, and just picking up on Director Chapman's comments in my sidebar here with Director Dahl. And this is for staff. Do we have a standing subscription for Starlink now that it's available? And can we fund this? I mean, it seems to be the solution. Don't want to be asking when it's too late.
Connected Coast has many agreements through Starlink. I don't know if that was a jab or how I answer that, right? Or
I mean, if you don't have telecommunications, you got satellites, they aren't shaken.
depends where they are. Just in about an hour, I'll tell you.
Director Davis.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in and say I really appreciate these grant applications going through and the materials we will be receiving for TASIS. We have 3 different CCANs that are all out of the tsunami zone, and we'll be using those to populate them with these supplies. And I see more communication equipment coming through, cots, food, water, many different kind of supplies. So we've tried to be proactive for many years here in TASIS, and we really appreciate the Strathcona Regional District backing us up on this. So thank you to everybody for voting in favor of these things along the line. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you to the, through the chair, thank you to the directors for your comments. And I just want to tag on to Director Chapman's theme in that very few of the fees in here are going to outside consultants. The focus of the last couple of years has really been boosting our in-community capacity, training our own team members to do training in other communities and vice versa. So we do so knowing that we appreciate, your support on this.
Thank you. Director Colburn.
I actually really truthfully would like an answer to Director Sinnott's question. The reason being is because I know our environment and I know where we are. We are in behind mountains. Some of our emergency preparedness gathering stations are in behind mountains that sometimes even sat phone can't reach. And so I'm wondering if there has been any thought into doing any kind of mobile, Starlink or other applications for internet for Wi-Fi.
So in all seriousness, telecommunications is all about redundancy. It doesn't matter if you're Shaw, Rogers, TELUS, us, Connected Coast, and TELUS. Everybody has interconnect relationships and backup redundancy plans with each other, including Starlink. I'll tell you though, Starlink is a very, very, very poor backup system for should a network go down. I'll give you an example, like Haida Gwaii, lots of problems with connectivity there, line going down. Our backup on Connected Coast is Starlink. And when you talk about a capacity, so you deliver, let's say a 10 gigabyte service to 500 customers, and then that comes through fiber, and you can get a gigabyte per person. When that goes down, you default to Starlink connection, for example. We'll be flooded with calls from people that can't even send an email. So it is a redundancy, but it's not anywhere near what we're using or expecting. So, but all networks are built on redundancy.
Director Chapman.
I appreciate the answer from the CAO, but I think the intent of the question was for the EOC to have connection to the outside world. Would we entertain the Starlink?
We have them. That's what I'm saying. We have lots of relationships and connections via Starlink on redundancy for things like that. So they exist on any network. Starlink is just now, it gives you the ability to have redundancy in areas where there used to be no redundancy. So it's poor, but it's something. So we have them throughout the network.
Mr. Yates.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If the board is interested, I believe Sean might be able to provide more information on emergency communications backup systems that are in place between emergency operational centers. And I know there has been a fair bit of work done with ham radio societies, et cetera, to achieve a certain level of functionality, but Sean would be the person who would get into the details of that.
And to tag on to Mr. Yates, and because I'm online, I must stress I'm not being facetious. I would love to prepare such a report because I love talking about comms.
Okay. Any additional questions? No. On receipt? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Director Colburn.
That a full proposal for the, that an application to the 2025 Emergency Support Services Grant Program for enhancing emergency response on behalf of all the local governments and First Nations identified in the January 17th report from the CAO be approved, and that the regional district commit to overall management of the grant if the application is successful.
Second.
Director Chapman got in there. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Director Wally.
Number 11, Disaster Resiliency and Innovation Grant Submission, that the report from the CAO be received.
Second.
Director Chapman, discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried.
I'd further remove that a full proposal for funding the Walters Island Water System Study be submitted for consideration by the DRIFT program, and that the board commit to covering any cost overruns associated with the project.
Second.
Director Chapman, discussion. Director Lanyon.
I read the report. I didn't see, I don't think, any reference to what potential cost overruns we'd be looking at. and whether those would be borne by a specific area. Just curious if you have more comment.
So typically what we do if we saw line of sight on cost overruns, we'd bring it back because there's not a service for this at this point. It's a unique situation where the Walters Cove side has delivered water from the First Nation, and the First Nation has kind of sent notice that they can't deliver that water anymore, so we have to look at solutions of it. So we don't have a service for that, so we don't have any funds, so we couldn't approve any cost overruns anyways. So if we apply for this grant and they're not going to be covered under the work we need to do, we'll come back and either ask for a source of fund from somebody else, but we just won't run it over because we don't have a pot to draw from.
Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. B, Director Wally. Did you just do B? We just did B. Nope.
I'll move that the Cortes Island Refuse Collection Capital Reserves report from the CAO be received.
Second.
So if I may, Mr. Chair, I mentioned this earlier, but yes, there's a capital reserve in this service function. There's nothing tangible, hard capital to replace it. And so what we're requesting the board is they allow us to repeal the bylaw and take that money and put them into operational reserves where they can be used.
Further discussion? Director Chapman?
My question to staff is, while there's no capital assets now, is there any vision in the future where some might be required?
I wouldn't say there is, but if, let's say there was, the funds are still there. They're in the operations reserve, but if they're in the capital reserve, they're more limited for the capital. I don't see, us starting refuse collection. It's a contract service right now that, we collect money for and we pay a contractor. So I don't see it, but it doesn't mean the money disappears, just creates a little more flexibility. I don't have any issue with it.
Okay. Further discussion? On receipt, all in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. B,
I move that a bylaw to repeal bylaw number 911, electoral area I refuse disposal, capital works, machinery and equipment reserve fund establishment, and to authorize the transfer of the existing capital reserves for operational purposes be prepared for the board's consideration.
Director Mawhinney, discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Director Rice.
13, request for financial assistance, Ocean Grove School Pact. I'd like to move option A, that the report from the Chief Administration Officer be received.
Second.
Director Von Esch, discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried.
Further, I'd like to move option B, that a grant in aid for the Ocean Grove School Parent Advisory Council in the amount of $2,000 be approved to assist with costs associated with facilitating the X Blocks and Sparks program to be paid from electoral area D grant and aid budget.
Director Wally, second. Discussion? Director Senate.
Yeah, I'd like to hear from the area director why we should go against potentially the policy about assisting other levels of government.
Director Rice.
Thank you for that question, Director Senate. This is outside of the school budget. This is an after-school program. Looking back in the history, this is something that Area D has granted, for a long time. And I think it's important to help our schools, particularly the parent packs for after-school programming. This also benefits the city of Campbell River too, so.
Director Dahl.
My question was pretty much the same, and I'm not going to vote against it, but I find it interesting that we have sent motions, defeated motions from other electoral areas asking for the exact same thing for schools and community centers and things like that, and said, this is against our policy, and then voted against it, but we continue to get these on the agenda. And, I mean, if I'm wrong, then staff can correct me and say, no, that's not against policy. But I specifically remember in the previous term and earlier in this term that we're not supposed to be funding other levels of government.
I would say that's correct. It's, so again, happens with the grant and aid requests though, and not to beat a dead horse because we, beat this horse all the time. The grant and aid requests are coming to the electoral area directors, and then those are coming here. So I don't have any control or authority about them coming. They're coming from the directors. So if the directors receive them and deliver them to us, they show up on the agenda, so.
Director Rice?
Again, I don't see this as being a grant going to another level of government. This is the school PAC asking for the grant. It's been granted in the past. I've been reducing my grants and aids budget. I don't give out very much money. And I'll just leave it at that. I think it's important to support this one and go from there.
Further discussion? Director Sinnott?
Yeah, I think we need to bring back the policy, and then if this is going to be a continual request from different PACs, that we need more defined guidelines. If it's going to be considered non-governmental assistance, then let's make it really clear, because I'm tired of having this debate. So I'll make a subsequent that we relook at this, particularly with the PACs.
The grant and aid policy is in the queue, yeah. We already have a resolution for that, and it's in the queue.
Okay, further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Director Von Esch.
Bylaws, bylaw number 157, liquid waste management planning, that the report from the CEO be received.
Second.
Director Colburn, discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. B,
Move that that separation of liquid waste management planning service via bylaw number 157 not be pursued, and that new bylaws to establish liquid waste management planning services for each of the electoral areas B and D be returned for further consideration by the board.
Director Mawhinney, discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Director Rice.
Item number 2, bylaw number 585, electoral area D zoning amendment, that the report from the Chief Administration Officer be received.
Second.
Director Colburn, discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried.
I'd like to further move that bylaw number 585, being a bylaw to amend the zoning regulations applicable to electoral area D, be now introduced and read a first time.
Second.
Director Wally, discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. C,
I'd like to move option C, that the rules be suspended and bylaw number 585 be given second and third readings.
Second.
Director Wally, discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried.
I'd like to move item D, that bylaw number 585, being the Campbell River Area Zoning Bylaw, 1991, amendment number 79, be reconsidered, finally passed, and adopted.
Second.
Director Wally, discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Thank you. Director Mawhinney.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to move that the report on bylaw number 586, electoral area C zoning amendment from the Chief Administrative Officer be received.
Second.
Director Colburn, discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. B,
I will move that bylaw number 586, being a bylaw to amend the zoning regulations applicable to the Quadra Island area, be now introduced and read a first time.
Second.
Director Bonesh, discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. C,
I'll move that bylaw number 586 be given second reading.
Director Wally, discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion's carried.
And I will move that a virtual public hearing to consider bylaw number 586 be held Wednesday, February 5th, 2025 at 7 p.m., and that the holding of the public hearing be delegated to the Electoral Area C Director.
Second.
Director Bonesh, discussion? All in favor? Oh, discussion, sorry, Director Mawhinney?
Thanks, Chair. I'm happy to see this because I do know that it's for a remote area. The last virtual hearing, I did hear from a couple people that they were unable to connect because of the way we were offering a Teams. So just hoping that this time there's a very clear online way for folks to be able to access the public hearing.
No guarantees.
Okay, then.
Right. Thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none? Carried. Maybe we need Starlink. Okay, now all directors. Director Dahl.
So while Director Dahl's looking for his place there, this is revenue anticipation borrowing is that if the regional district runs out of our money before we get our funding in the summer from the municipalities, we annually have a revenue anticipation borrowing bylaw created so that we'll have access to money until we get our funds in the summer. I don't believe we've actually used it for the last 5 years, or we had to exercise it, have we, Mike? 2017. So it's just a backstop in case temporarily we're short of cash until we're replenished in the summer.
Okay, going on with A.
That the report from Chief Administrative Officer be received.
Director Davis? No. Director Chapman? Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. B,
That bylaw number 593, being a bylaw to authorize the borrowing of funds in anticipation of receiving revenue, be now introduced and read a first time.
Second.
Director Colburn? Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. C,
The rules be suspended and bylaw number 593 be given second and third reading.
Second.
Director Colburn, discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried.
That bylaw number 593 being revenue anticipation borrowing authorization bylaw number 2025 be reconsidered, finally passed and adopted.
That would definitely Director Chapman. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Director Chapman? Sorry, it's not on correspondence. Correspondence A through, or 1 through 9 be received.
I'd like to pull number 3, if I may, Chair.
Yes, I'd like to pull number 2, and I'd like to pull number 8 and 9.
I'd like to pull 1, please.
I'm sorry, which one did you want to pull, Director Mawhinney?
Let's do one at a time, Mr. Chair.
Most of them being pulled, so we're just going to do 1.
And 7, sorry, my mistake.
That's all of them, pretty much. Okay, we'll start off with 1. Director Davis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm sure you all remember the previous discussion regarding this where.
Sorry,
I
we need a
flagged-
motion to receive first.
Motion received.
Second?
Director Bonesh, second. Discussion, go ahead.
On receipt?
Yeah,
Okay. Regarding Brewster Wind Power Project, I had flagged some geostability issues in the area. And I thought that there should be some sort of assessment done. I think a letter was, well, I know that a letter was written on behalf of the regional district that flagged.
I'm sorry, you're fading in and out.
I'm sorry, I can't do anything about that.
What you're doing now is working, so
Yeah,
just lean
Director
in.
Davis, just face your screen and bring your mouth closer. It seems to make a difference.
Okay, I'll try that. I had flagged previously that there's geostability issues in the area if there was limestone. I wasn't completely clear on whether these particular towers that they're proposing would be on the limestone. Since then, I know that some of them are. Caves have been flagged on some of the sites. And there definitely needs to be an assessment done of that because some of these particular wind towers could come crashing down, as I've mentioned before. High elevation caves are often used as bat hibernation sites. Now, I realize we don't have a Cave Protection Act in BC, but we do have some protections for wildlife. So it's really unfortunate that the provincial government would deign to just pass on any sort of environmental assessment. So I'm going to continue to advocate for that, and I'm waiting for them to get in touch with me in my wearing my other hat as president of the Canadian Cave Conservancy. But I will continue to hold their feet to the fire on this. And I would also say that it's going to protect the viability of this project, because if these things collapse, it's going to cost them a lot of money. I don't want to see that happen. So, thanks.
Okay. Further discussion on receipt on number one? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion's carried. Number two, Director Sinnott.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that the December 9th, 2024 correspondence from Mowi Canada regarding the draft transition plan for BC salmon farms be received, as well as the December 12th, 2024 correspondence from Governor Canada regarding the salmon aquaculture transition plan for British Columbia be received, and I'll have a subsequent.
Second, Director Chapman. Discussion. Director Sinnott.
Yeah, just because we've received this correspondence, I think it's going, my subsequent is going to be to refer it to the natural resources, because there's, I think, the requests particularly from the Government of Canada for some input.
Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Number three,
No, my
sorry,
subsequent is to
subsequent.
refer the items under number 2 to our Natural Resource Committee for follow-up and presentation to a position for the board.
Second.
Director Dahl. Discussion. Director Davis.
I'd just like to make a comment regarding this. I realize the Strathcona Regional District Board had previously written a letter in favor of status quo and seemed to be opposed to this phasing out of open net fish farms. And the position of TASIS was always that we need to support the government in phasing these out. We're not opposed to fish farming. We're just opposed to the damage they're doing to our environment. We depend on sport fishing, and I think I've mentioned some of the reasons for why these farms are damaging. Now, as most of you probably know, we had a recent spill of 7,500 liters from a nearby fish farm of diesel fuel. And I'm sure there's harms to the environment that have happened from that. It was due to negligence. If we didn't have these open net fish farms here, this would not have occurred. So we're going to continue to advocate at our village municipality level for a transition away from them.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Director Mawhinney?
Thanks, Chair. I Could I just maybe get the motion read back? Because I felt like I heard something about a report back to the board, but maybe I misunderstood that, so I just wanted to be clear on what I was voting on.
Well, if I may, it's been referred to the Natural Resources Committee, which is a committee of the board, so anything from that committee will come back to the board. So I don't know if the intent was to write a report. Something will come back to the board from that committee.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
I'm sorry?
If it passes.
If it passes, that's correct. Okay, so any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Director Mawhinney.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to move that the correspondence regarding the inclusion of electoral area C into the service area for the Strathcona Gardens Recreation Facility be received.
Second.
Director Colburn, discussion. Director Mawhinney.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to start by saying that I appreciate the constituents who took the time to send in an email voicing their concerns. If you've taken a look, you'll notice that there are more than 60 pieces of heartfelt correspondence included under this one heading. These letters are from community members across the demographic spectrum, representing young homeowners, folks working to raise families on the island, seniors, Outer Discovery Islanders, and regular everyday folks. I imagine if you've looked at the correspondence, you will have gained some understanding of how the residents of Area C choose a rural, low-tax lifestyle with access to on-island community recreation amenities, and do not believe that Strathcona Gardens is a service they should be paying for. I heard on CBC a while ago that only 15% of Canadians live rurally, not in a municipality. Area C residents choose our lifestyle for a reason, and it doesn't include easy access to municipal amenities. People choose to live in Area C's rural community for the easy access to outdoor recreation and connected, vibrant community. If we look at the SRD's community profile information, we see that the median household income of Area C residents is nearly $20,000 lower than the BC average and $12,000 lower than the SRD average. I've spoken with many people in the last month who have shared financial concerns with me. The significance of adding a Strathcona Gardens tax to their already stretched budgets is very stressful for some of these people. I've spoken with retirees that have chosen to live in a rural area with low taxes and services as it is a good fit for their budget limitations, and they have genuine concern that they may have to move if this Strathcona Gardens tax comes to pass. There is a second recreation report coming to the board at some point about additional recreation participation. There could be many steps between that report and formal consideration of inclusion of Area C in the service, which would likely necessitate a referendum. I just want to point out that with the demonstrated level of community concern, there is the option for the board to not move ahead with inclusion considerations, and I'm hopeful that this will be the way the board votes when the time comes.
Any other discussion? Director Sinnott.
Yes, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to this, and thank you, Director Mawhinney. We really appreciate the concerns raised, and I think it's really still a cart before the horse, or the horse before the cart, whichever way you want to look at it, but we don't have the report yet. I do know that the Gardens also provides a lot of sort of quasi-medical services with its rehabilitation program. It's sort of, in light of that, I would say it's more akin to a medical service, which everyone pays for in the regional district with our hospitals, as well as we have the benefit of the youth services and direct buses to Quadra Island to service the youth who attend the Gardens, as well as we do have various hockey players. I remember from the days there was a Quadra team, in fact. So until we get the full scope of the information that comes back, it's just, I think, alarmism in the community until we know what's a reasonable course to take.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Number 4. Did anybody want to pull forward, Director Colburn?
That the December 16th, 2024 correspondence from the UBCM regarding our Community Works Fund payment for fiscal 2024-2025 be received.
Director Wally? Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Number 5. Anyone?
I'll move that the December 17th, 2024 correspondence regarding Elk Falls Provincial Park from the province of BC regarding a proposed boundary amendment be received.
Second.
Director Mawhinney, discussion. Director Rice?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering how effective this change is going to be. I do know that I spend a lot of time on logging roads. I spend a lot of time in the bush, and the roads are disgraceful. So I don't see what Modi is going to do to make these roads any better, but I could be wrong.
Okay, further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Number 6. Okay, motion to receive, sorry?
I said I'll take it, that the January 7th correspondence from the Independent Contractors and Businesses Association, ICBA, regarding the local government construction procurement be received.
There we go.
Second.
Director Wally was second. Discussion? I'm sure it was. All in favor? Oh, Director Rice?
This was an interesting correspondence that caught my eye, and I'd like to know more about it. So I'm wondering, as a board, how could we get some more information? Because I do feel that sometimes bidding, particularly with the smaller companies, is kind of challenging. So I'm wondering, is there a way that we can get more information for the board?
We can ask them for a delegation if you want.
Okay.
Okay, on number 6, receipt. All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Number 7. Oh, wait. Sorry, Director Rice?
So I would like to move a motion to ask this company to appear as a delegation for a future meeting at their discretion.
Okay, second?
I'll second that as an association.
Thank you. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Number 7.
Okay, I'll make the motion that the January 8th, 2025 correspondence from the Union of BC Municipalities regarding the applications for the Local Government Contract Management Committee be received.
Second.
Director Chapman, discussion. Director Sinnott.
Yes, thank you. Don't know what the position of the City of Camp River is. I see that the sizing of the various committee members that sit on this are going to mean either it's Camp River and the over 15,000, or I'm not sure whether we'd even get someone for the smaller communities than we have a regional district. But with respect to the regional district, I think as many applications from the regional area should be put forward. And just looking for guidance from staff in terms of how we would proceed with filling that committee. Would we just have the chair handle that and a canvas members, or is that something we have to put back in front of the board?
I think we'd have to inquire. I don't know the answer to that, so certainly can reach out to them and inquire.
So I'll have a subsequent that we follow up on that.
Okay, further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Go ahead, Director Sinnott.
Yeah, I would make a motion that either before the deadline that's set out in the document, that we come up with a procedure for making recommendations to fill positions on that management committee from the regional district and working with our member municipalities as well.
Do we have a second? Second. Director Chapman, discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Director Sinnott, number 8.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that the January 15th, 2025 correspondence from the Liquor Cannabis Regulation Branch regarding the site and community assessment decision approval and principle for the Shelter Point Distillery Lounge endorsement be received.
Second.
Director Dahl, discussion? All in favor?
Can I just,
Discussion?
I have a question. There's no subsequent needed. It's received. It's been approved. Is that what my understanding is? Good. Just want to bring it to everyone's attention. Good work.
Director Mawhinney.
This is about the previous item, the RCMP contract. I know you're looking for a report, but in that item, it does mention, I just had to go back and open it, that you're needing to be applying, I think, by February 7th. So I don't think we would have a time for a report to come back to the board, at least for this year.
No, likely not, but we'll communicate with them and through the chair and figure out what we need to do.
Yeah, my motion was pretty vague in terms of a process by the deadline.
Okay, so further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Number 9, sorry. Director Sinnott.
Yeah, actually, I pulled this one by an error. It should have been 7, but I'll make the motion that the January 17th, 2025 correspondence from Kicking International Council out of local environmental initiatives regarding rural community membership with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities be received.
Director Chapman, discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. There we go. Members report. Director Mawhinney.
Thank you, Chair. I guess I would move receipt of the report.
Director Wally, discussion? Bless you.
Would that be me?
That'd be you.
Okay, great. As you probably know, and I just got reappointed to this Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities Solid Waste and Circular Economy Committee. And if you take a look at the report, you will see that as a group or committee, we have come up with a list of 6 priority recommendations that we are looking to take forward through AVICC and to UBCM. They're all attached to this report. We were each asked to bring forward one of the motions and to move it forward to AVICC and UBCM. I have since learned just yesterday that at least 5 of them were moved already by one of the regional districts, so it's not quite as necessary that we do that now. However, I think it's important to know that to take a look at all 6 of them because we will be needing to vote on these when we get to AVICC. So, yeah.
Further discussion? All in favor of receipt? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Director Mawhinney?
Thank you, Chair. I will move receipt of my other report, which is the Regional District of Mount Waddington Seaweed Industry Development Plan.
Second.
Director Von Esch, discussion. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I don't really have a lot to say about this seaweed industry development plan, other than we do have a really similar climate and coast here in the Strathcona Regional District as they do in Mount Waddington. And we are facing similar challenges with finfish aquaculture sites being closed. I thought this plan was really interesting. It was funded through REDIP and ICE-T funding, and it really outlines some of the potential and also and possibilities and potential areas that need further support. And I thought it was quite interesting, and that maybe you folks would too. So that's really why it's here.
Thank you. Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Thank you. Management report, none. New business, none. Before we move into closed session, we have a break. Absolutely. Sorry, am I missing something?
Yes.
Sidebar.
Sidebar? Okay. There are items, closed session. Report from the CAO be received. That the meeting be closed to the public for consideration matter deemed to fall within the parameters. Oh, sorry, couldn't call the question. I just wanted to get right into it. All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. B, that the meeting be closed to the public to consider matters deemed to fall within the parameters of subsection 90-1A, C, D, J, N, O, and 92B of the Community Charter.
So moved.
There we go. Second was Director Chapman. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. We will reconvene at 2:35.